We are calling the Truckee Town Council regular meeting of February 23rd to order. Judy, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Pallavi?
Unmuting. Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Zabriskie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Romack?
Here.
And Mayor Klostad?
Here.
Thank you.
And this evening, we have a very special treat. Chief Billingsley and his sons Thomas and Luke will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. This is Chief Billingsley with Truckee Police Department with my two sons, Thomas and Luke Billingsley, and we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance for you. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. This is
Okay, that is nice. So now is our public comment. Judy, do we have any public comment for this evening? That is not on the agenda. Okay, great. And do we have on the screen how to call in? I'm assuming in case people are watching, you can email Truckee at townoftruckee.com or call or text 428-6555.
I do have a text message that just came in.
Okay.
For general public comment. Can you please give us an update on Coburn Crossing Apartments? This was our first local workforce housing project. It's been over a year. How many units are actually rented to locals? How many to non-locals? And how many are available? Is this project helping locals find housing? Please put this on an upcoming agenda. Thank you, Matt Miller.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, with that, then we're going to move to presentations. Our first one is a video of Chief Billingsley being sworn in. Welcome, Chief Billingsley.
I, Randall Billingsley, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you. We are so pleased to have you, Chief Billingsley. I'm sorry it's a bit anticlimactic during these COVID times, but that it does not represent our enthusiasm to have you take this position, so we are thrilled. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Jen?
Just, we swore Chief Billingsley in last week.
I don't think your mic is on. Okay. Then 5.2, Food Rescue Feed Truckee presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Sherburne and I'm the Civic Spark Fellow for the town of Truckee. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. If I can find it somewhere. But today I'll be presenting about a new food recovery program that we have started through Keep Truckee Green in tandem with Sierra Community House and Truckee Sourdough Company. So first, just for a little bit of background that's relevant to the legislative context of why this is cool and exciting and important. Organic waste in California is by far and away the biggest chunk of our waste, and that includes paper, food, lumber, other organics, and food is this 18% chunk here. So we're throwing away a lot of food waste every year, while a lot of Californians are food insecure. At the same time, methane from decomposing food in landfills contributes significantly to climate change. So that provides some of the background for Senate Bill 1383, which some of you may have heard of, which is a California bill that was passed in 2016, but will go into effect fully in 2022. And the overall goal of SB 1383 is to reduce methane emissions by reducing organic waste and thus to combat climate change. And so some of these goals are pasted up here, reducing landfilled organic waste by 50% and 75%. And then our goal here that we're going to focus on is by 2025, increasing the recovery of currently disposed of edible food by 20%. And so there's a lot that jurisdictions have to do in preparation for this, and a lot of that is required by CalRecycle, who's the enforcing body. So we have to assess the capacity of existing food recovery, establish a food recovery program, or increase the existing infrastructure, inspect commercial generators for compliance, and do education and outreach, and have and report back to CalRecycle. So in that vein, we just launched a new food recovery program in the past few weeks, 3 weeks ago, called Feed Truckee. And this is a small but really exciting effort to not only comply with some of the regulations of SB 1383, but just to improve our community, reduce waste, and feed people who are hungry. And so the model of this is that Keep Truckee Green recruits volunteers throughout the community who go to pick up surplus bread products from Truckee Sourdough and deliver them to Sierra Community House. And so these are bread products that have, before this program, been thrown away because, unfortunately, when bread products don't sell in the grocery stores that Truckee Sourdough provides to them, they are forced to throw them away. And so they were throwing away a certain quantity of bread every day that was pretty staggering. And so through working with them and working with Sierra Community House, we were able to establish a twice a week pickup that we're hoping to expand as the year goes on. And to include other food distribution partners in that, like Tahoe Food Hub, potentially. But these are some photos from our first delivery and then from a distribution that Sierra Community House did. To look at some of the metrics, we are delivering about 200 pounds, which corresponds to about 200 loaves of bread every delivery, so twice a week. In the past 3 weeks, we've delivered 1,165 pounds of rescued bread, and all of that has been distributed to people in the community. And just extrapolating that out, if we were to continue with twice a week deliveries, we'd be doing about 20,000 loaves of bread in a year. And that would be a minimum because we're hopefully going to expand. But that's a quick overview of Feed Truckee. We're really excited about it and hoping to continue to grow it. So thank you.
That is fantastic. What a great program. Erica and Sarah, I'm so excited. Yes, it's cool, exciting, and important. Do we have any questions from council on this item? And we'll just run through our roll call order. So on all of these items, we'll go Councilmember Polivy, Councilmember Zabriskie, Vice Mayor Henderson, and Councilmember Romack. So Councilmember Polivy, do you have anything?
I think we're all going to probably say the same thing, but what an incredible opportunity. So cool. Thank you, Sarah. What a great first project. I think this is your first big project. So thank you so much, and great job. Keep Truckee Green Team. Keep it up. And that's it.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
Thank you. I agree with Dave.
And Vice Mayor Henderson.
thank you. It's one of those initiatives that just warms your heart and makes you really excited, and I'm so grateful for all of your work on it.
And Councilmember Romack.
And I will echo the sentiments of my fellow council members. Also, in the spirit of transparency, I did want to make sure everyone's aware that I am on the board of Sierra Community House, though I had no involvement whatsoever in this program. But I did just want to make that clear if anyone was curious. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, Keep Truckee Green, your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to keep coming up with amazing programs like this. And I have no doubt you will, because every year you blow my mind on new programs and new ways to creatively forward our progress towards greenhouse gas reductions. So thank you. Okay, and with that, we're on to 5.3, the announcement of employee incentive awards. Jen, is your mic working now?
I understand it's working, you just can't hear me.
Ah, okay.
We have several employee incentive awards tonight. There we go, and now we can hear it in here. Thank you, Rory. And I love this part of the job. It's so exciting to highlight all the excellent work that our employees are doing and share that with the council and the community. So first up, we have Todd Landry, Kelly Beatty, and Jason Vickers in our Public Works, Engineering, Transportation divisions. And Todd, Kelly, and Jason came together as a team to get the transit shelter project constructed in front of the Senior Living Center. This was a CDBG funded program. When we didn't have quite enough CDBG funds to complete the project, Kelly found other funding to finish it off. Todd ran the project in-house, led the design, which included both the shelter structure and the site work. And then Jason stepped in and drafted the site plans, which is something we typically hire a consultant to do. So because we were able to collaborate and do it in-house, this project was billed in April 2020. The timeline for the project was quicker than any other project that we typically do. It was put out to bid in August, and the bid openings were in September. So because of that work, we have lifeline services provided at the Senior Housing Center, which will really benefit those residents for years to come. So thank you, Kelly, Todd, and Jason, and congratulations. Next, we have another Public Works team. Brett Elbert, Jack Weir, Stephanie Klink, Tom Pratt, Tom Lawrenson, and Josh Balzer. And these are members of our facilities crew. With COVID here, we were looking at opportunities to space out our employees to provide 6 feet of social distancing, and also to have just a safer work environment for our staff when they're here in Town Hall. And we had an opportunity to relocate admin services to a larger space in the building where SBC previously existed, and they've moved over to the old admin services area. It's a smaller footprint, and that fit their needs better. So this group rapidly stopped what they were doing, came in. They were very flexible with our modified designs and changing designs and paint colors, and made this happen really quickly so that our admin team could be in a really safe environment and comfortable environment during COVID. So we're really appreciative of all their work and thank them. Next, we have 2 employees in our police department. So our police department does Employee of the Year and Officer of the Year awards. We have Angela Smith, our Community Service Officer, and she was nominated as the Police Employee of the Year by her colleagues. Angela is completely dedicated to the department, possesses sound judgment, and is an essential member of the police department. She's done an amazing job training staff, managing and tracking all the department's property and evidence. She manages the uniform and equipment inventory, and she will be keeping us in line and make sure we're adhering to all of our laws, especially as she relocates over to the new courtyard where our evidence building is going to be in property. So thank you, Angela. And then Brandon Mosier was nominated and selected as our Police Officer of the Year. Officer Mosier continues to show his dedication and enthusiasm to the department and community. He possesses sound judgment and is a trusted member of the department. He exceeds expectations when it comes to criminal investigation and always takes initiative to see cases all the way through without sending them to the detectives for completion. He does it all on his own. He's an integral part of our FTO, or Field Training Officer program, and our major investigation team and range master as well. So congratulations, Brandon, and thank you. And then a couple more. We had a lot of great work this past quarter. Carolina Scarcia. She is in our Community Development Building Division. And Carolina is here almost every night when I leave, and one of the first people here every morning. We've had staffing transitions in the building department, 3 new staff at the front counter, and Carolina has taken the lead to train all of them while doing her existing job and taking on new roles. And she does it always with a smile, happy to do it. You wouldn't guess that she is here as many hours as she is, and she's always working on the weekend and responding as well. So for all of her excellence and teamwork, we wanted to acknowledge Carolina. And then lastly, our amazing HR team, Bonnie Thompson-Hardin, Kimmy Bullock, and Kim Harris. We talk a lot about COVID here in terms of our community and our community response. We've had a lot of COVID response internally as well. The state regulations, OSHA regulations are changing constantly. We're constantly making sure we're providing as safe of a facility and work environment for our employees that we can. And Bonnie, Kimmy, and Kim have taken the lead on that and really helped us to have 0 transmissions in the workplace. So we're very proud of that. So to all the employees, thank you very much, and thank you for letting me share their great work with you.
My goodness, that's a lot of incredible work. I'm really especially grateful for the teamwork and creative problem solving for actually getting projects done on a short timeline. And, we've been using this word so much lately, but our staff has really done some incredible pivots. And I'm so grateful, and so grateful for their graciousness in doing those as well. So thank you to each of you. I wish I could name you all, but I was feverishly writing down names, and I know I didn't catch any, so I don't want to miss any. I will turn this over to council comments. Do we have any council comments? You can just raise your hand. Okay, we're good. We are going to move on. So right back to you, Jen. 5.4 for town manager report.
Great, thank you. I have a few reports tonight. First, along COVID lines, the governor has announced some additional COVID support and relief for communities. There's some business relief funding. This is a 4-fold increase from previous business support, from a $500 million effort now up to $2 billion. And that's grant money for small businesses up to $25,000 each. And then $50 million is allocated specifically for cultural institutions. So we'll be providing more information as we get it in terms of how to apply and become qualified for that, for those support efforts. There's also some fee waivers built into the new plan from the governor specifically for restaurants and bars, as well as barbers and cosmetologists. That's a new addition. And there's some stimulus relief support for income qualifying individuals. It's primarily for those earning less than $30,000 a year. But again, we'll provide support on our social media and website on information for how people can apply if they qualify. Vaccinations, a reminder, we're using My Turn now to register and get information on your vaccines when you can become eligible to receive them. It's myturn.ca.gov if you're interested in signing up for those notifications. I would note that vaccine supply still is very limited, so please remain patient, but that is a good way for you to get notifications of when you can be eligible. And then lastly, Mayor Klofstad, you and I had the pleasure to present to Nevada County Board of Supervisors this morning. We use that as an opportunity to not only introduce ourselves, but to really extend our gratitude for their support during COVID. Nevada County helped us provide the Winter Wonderland displays in downtown Truckee with CARES Act funding, and also sponsored the Nevada County Relief grant programs that we helped contribute to. So really, a lifeline for our community. In addition, we wanted to highlight that great partnership and carry that forward and encourage that moving forward into this coming year. We do have a lot of joint advocacy efforts and a lot of joint collaborative priorities and initiatives that we think will make great partnerships. So we had a really nice presentation. We started the presentation with a video, which we offered our thanks and allowed the supervisors and county team to kind of tour through our winter wonderland. So we're just going to take a few minutes and share that video with the council members and the community, and so that they can see what we shared with the county and expressed our gratitude for.
Good morning, Nevada County. I'm Lindsay Romack, newly elected Truckee Town Council member. I am really excited about the town's partnership and collaboration with Nevada County, and I look forward to continuing to see this partnership grow and evolve over the next several years. As a council, we are really focused on community and regional partnerships, because one thing we've seen throughout this COVID time is that we are really stronger together when we work together. And speaking of partnerships, I wanted to express my appreciation for the county's CARES Act funding process, as well as establishing and coordinating the Nevada County Relief Grant Program. Both of these programs have been a lifeline to our Truckee community. They've provided resources to our businesses, so they've been able to stay open, pivot, and reimagine their business model. So we wanted to take this opportunity to showcase what this funding and partnership has done for Truckee. So I'd like to invite you to come on a tour so you can hear from some businesses and community members on what this funding has helped them do.
Hi, just like to thank the town of Truckee, all of the people working out down in the town of Truckee, as well as Nevada County, for all of their support during the pandemic. They've supported the downtown in numerous ways, from Winter Wonderland with the Truckee Downtown Merchants Association to grant funding through the CARES Act in Nevada County to help us put these platforms up. They have moved restrictions to allow us to modify our operations so that we can operate during the pandemic. So they've done many things to help support us over the last 12 months, and we'd just like to say thank you.
I will say I think a lot of us are really lucky to be pivoting in such a beautiful place in a town that is so full of community and full of the ability for change. And I think that for us as a business, it's been really motivating to want to change and to want to pivot and create a safe space for people to be in, an inspiring space for people to be in, and also just make sure that we are still helping to cultivate the community that we're so known for, Truckee is so known for. So thank you.
We want to thank Nevada County for the opportunity, the town of Truckee for being the grant submitter, and for bringing us all together, the Nevada County, town of Truckee, the Downtown Merchants Association, the Chamber, and Sierra Business Council. From its inception of what do we do to help our businesses get through this winter to what became the Winter Wonderland. And because of the Nevada County money and the town of Truckee money, the downtown merchants were able to light up downtown, create this very fabulous selfie station at Victory Plaza, which when the lights are on, it looked like an ice palace, which was really a cool connection to Truckee's history and heritage. And then being able to see the lights extended all the way downtown Donner Pass Road to include all of our businesses was really something special and unique this year. The stages allowed our outdoor business, our restaurants to be able to serve outdoors when they could. And there's a real synergy between restaurants and retail. So by bringing people downtown to dine, it helped our retail, which eventually really helped all of town. So the Chamber was really happy, and it was very fun to be able to create the graphic presentation of what Winter Wonderland was. So we created 60 flagpole banners that hung all the way downtown. We created posters and stickers and window clings and distributed them to all of our businesses so that everywhere people went, they would see this posters and window clings and all, and know that we're all coming together to get us through this winter. We also created masks, our gaiters, and we gave away 2,000 of them from mid-December till now. We've got a few more left because we're bringing Winter Wonderland through the end of March. So it was very fun to do, and we were proud to be part of it and to really celebrate our history by a vintage look that we created, and also help all of our businesses come together to get us through this challenging winter.
You know, the Winter Wonderland was something that I think has been unique to our area in this time. It's been very helpful to have people know that, hey, we're open, we're here. You know, it's been a hard time for retail, obviously, and the pandemic has been very stressful. To let people know that Truckee's open and welcome and that people are here and that our stores are here, even in their limited capacity, we needed to have people come up with us, and the Winter Wonderland was a great way to showcase our town.
The pandemic's definitely been one of the more challenging periods of my life. You know, we had just gotten open a few years ago and still trying to grow the business. Then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. We shut down for 2 months, and in that time, that's when CR Relief Kitchen began. That was a great moment for all of us. You know, we were able to at least do something with ourselves and with the kitchens that we had. And since then, we have opened, we changed our beautiful restaurant into what's just like a standing zone with plexiglass, and it's just kind of been a shame not to have people indoor dining, providing the excellent service that we love to do. Instead, we have picnic tables outside, and it's in a parking lot. It's not the greatest, but it sufficed. It's gotten us through, and it still continues to be a challenge every day, so we're still adapting.
What can I say about the Nevada County Relief Fund? We've had, 4 rounds now, I believe. I've been a part of 3 of those 4 rounds as a person on the panel, and being able to see all the different businesses that needed support. And this is the one thing I know to be true. If it's $2,500, if it's $5,000, if it's $25,000, I'm telling you, the businesses need it, and it is powerful, and we are helping businesses help themselves. So thank you, Nevada County Relief Fund. I also would be remiss if I didn't talk about the bear behind me that's hugging me, because the reality is that Sarah Smith, the artist that created this bear, and then Nancy Holliday, who created the other signs, really makes our downtown pop, and it shows our art-filled, it gives an art-filled experience, which is just really powerful.
We feel very honored to be part of such a tight-knit community that supports local businesses so strongly.
Just wanted to say a huge thank you to the town of Truckee for their support that allowed us to help build this awesome winter wonder garden. And really helped us get through a very tough time and keep doing what we do, which is beer, food, and good times.
Yeah, huge thanks to the Nevada County Relief Fund for helping us support our community to bring everyone this great outdoor space where they can enjoy each other and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much to the Truckee Tahoe community for supporting us through these trying times, through COVID, for drinking beer outside in the rain, shine, snow, whatever it takes. You guys have helped us through this whole adventure.
Just want to personally give a big thanks to Nevada County for the Winter Wonderland Fund. Enabled us to get through this super difficult time that we're in the middle of, and helped with this. And you know, there's sometimes businesses and government don't go together 100%, but in all honesty, everyone's been so awesome through this, and we're really grateful. So thank you so much.
I want to thank you for the collaboration and support support the county has provided Truckee's businesses through the relief fund and more generally in just about every aspect of controlling COVID-19 on both sides of the mountain.
Hello, Nevada County Board of Supervisors. I am Truckee Town Council Member Dave Polivy, and during the pandemic last year, I was serving as mayor for the town of Truckee, and certainly none of us were expecting to lead through a pandemic and such confusion that we had over the course of the year, but it was a pleasure to work with all of your staff, all of the elected officials throughout the county. As you're all aware, it was devastating to see the impacts the pandemic had on our communities, and with your collaborative approach to using CARES Act funds for grant support and establishing and leading the Nevada County Relief Grant Program, the town was able to leverage those funds combined with our general fund monies to really support our community and come out stronger on this end. We wanted to thank you for your support, Nevada County, and hope you enjoyed your tour today through our Winter Wonderland. We look forward to continue to grow and foster the partnership between the town and county going forward. Thank you so much.
So thank you all for participating in that. And it was very evident this morning while we were at the supervisors meeting virtually that, there's still a lot of very raw emotions and a lot of desperation to be past COVID and be at the end of this tunnel. So just want to thank our community and our staff and council. The Truckee way and the ethos that we all live by is really reflective in the comments that we receive. And I'm so grateful to be here and be part of this community. So thank you.
I will ditto that for sure. And yeah, thank you for all of your work in putting together that PowerPoint presentation and the video. It was really well received. The Board of Supervisors is definitely looking forward to continuing to work with us and stated as such, and I think we were a breath of fresh air that morning. Okay, so Judy, do we have any public comment on any of the presentations?
Let me check. I'd like to make a brief announcement first.
Of course. Can we hear you? I'm not sure. Is your mic on?
My microphone's
okay,
on. I'm
great.
sure they can hear me in the public, but probably not to
Okay.
So the Channel 18 feed is coming in and out, and we can legally continue this meeting, and I have updated our website to reflect that we won't be on Channel 18 tonight, but that will be totally available, live streamed, and the address is linked on our agendas. So we're fine to proceed with the meeting this evening, and I'll check the recordings right now to see if we have any public comment.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, as we're sitting here in the chambers, we could usually see ourselves in a slight delay live on TV, and we're not able to see that right now. It's playing the news, but it sounds like we are live streaming. We're just not on channel 18.
Correct.
Okay.
So we don't have any public comment that we've received text or voicemail on items not on this agenda.
Or on any of the presentations?
None on the presentations.
Okay, great. Then we are ready to move on to consent calendar items, unless I see any other indication from council members. No? Okay. Would any member of council like to pull a consent item? Would any member of staff? Okay, so we have two items on consent, the minutes from February 9th meeting 2021 and an easement abandonment for 10992 and 11008 Zermatt Drive. So given those are our two items, do I have a motion?
I will motion approval.
Second.
Okay, so that's Councilmember Romack motioned and Zabriskie was second. Roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Polivy?
Yes.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Romack?
Yes.
And Mayor Klostad?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, we are going to go straight into council reports. And from there, we will close this meeting and reopen our joint meeting with the Planning Commission. So, in our roll call order, Councilmember Pallavi, what are your council reports?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Klostad. I don't know if anybody was able to virtually attend the 2021 Visit California Outlook Forum, but we had our panel this past Friday. They had over 3,500 remote attendees, although I have absolutely no idea who attended our actual session. I was with Board of Supervisor from Mono County, along with the Director of Tourism from Idaho. And I would say the predominant theme of the entire conference, in addition to our panel, was simply sustainable tourism, with a lot of talk about carrying capacities, for sure. So, the big takeaway I got was that we're not alone, and that so many other communities just like ours throughout California and really throughout the entire Intermountain West are dealing with so many of the pressures, specifically on so many of our infrastructure issues, trailheads, outdoor recreation, things like that. These are very, very common issues that are going to start to really be talked about a lot more and get developed throughout. So I look forward to helping to lead that, both with the TBID with Visit Truckee Tahoe, but also at a broader level, with the town and everybody and all of our other partners. So that was exciting. This morning, I had a great opportunity to meet with Congressman McClintock's staff, two of his staffers. We were able, again, to talk about some of the wildfire resiliency issues, along with how all of that links up with outdoor recreation. And I'll be providing, they haven't met our new town manager, Jen Calloway, yet, so I'll be following up with an introduction so that Jen can get to meet our legislative representatives of the federal government. I think that we had a Visit Truckee Tahoe meeting last week as well, in addition to just been talking with Patty Baird about all sorts of great stuff as we head into the summertime, with how basically how we're going to prepare for what we all believe is going to be a very, very heavy tourism-based season. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pallavi. Councilmember Zabriskie?
I attended two LAFCO meetings. The first one was simply a orientation, and the second one we discussed a recent contested change in Nevada City's sphere of influence, approved an expansion of the Nevada Irrigation District's service area, and then ratified approval of our public utility, the TPUD's expansion of broadband to students of our local school district living at the Donner Creek Mobile Home Park. And then attended two COVID updates and have been discussing with experts and other knowledgeable people about climate action planning, and then the general plan update.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. Vice Mayor Henderson.
Thank you. Fewer meetings than normal, I think, mostly because I was fairly busy speaking with several of our Planning Commission applicants. I did participate in our weekly COVID calls and had the pleasure of chatting with the Rotary Club, which is always just such a lovely experience. Are we talking about our Planning Commission appointees now, or did you want to hold on that?
We would love to hear about your Planning Commissioner appointees.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I am really excited to be appointing Daniel Freeman to the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to say a few words about Daniel. He's a longtime local resident. He's also a business owner and employer here in Truckee, and I've been really impressed with Daniel and watching Planning Commission meetings and just in the discussions that I've had with him. He analyzes every project that comes forth in its own light. He holds projects to a really high standard to ensure that they're the best possible projects for our community. As a developer and contractor and someone who's really community focused, he brings a very unique perspective to this team. I would also say that what I value about Daniel is he really prioritizes, cautious and planned development and growth, and reviews projects through so many different lenses: the project itself, the environmental impacts, the benefits to our community, like trail infrastructure and providing outdoor spaces. And he said something really interesting to me just a couple of days ago. He said, "It's not my job as a commissioner to play architect, but it is my job to raise the bar where I can." And I just thought that was so spot on. He's also very collaborative. And I think, like me, he views a lot of conversations as compromises and trying to drive toward resolution. And just his willingness to view things through these different lenses from multiple perspectives is a big part of why I'm really excited to appoint him to the commission.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Welcome, Daniel. And Councilmember Romack.
Thank you. Before I get into my planning commissioner, I attended the weekly COVID calls. So thank you to Bob Womack and Chief Billingsley and Town Manager Jen Calloway for always keeping us updated. Like Courtney, I attended a Rotary meeting, though a different one than she did, but it was a pleasure speaking with Rotary. As you all know, I do serve on the Mountain Housing Council for the town. So in that capacity, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that the Truckee Artist Lofts are taking pre-applications right now through Friday. And you can find more information at truckeeartistlofts.com. I thought that was very important, just to make sure anyone who's interested in potentially living there, be sure to go and fill out an application. And then also, as Courtney said, I've been spending a lot of time talking with planning commissioner applicants. I want to thank everyone who applied. There were so many qualified candidates. This was a very, very tough decision, and I say that in complete honesty. I thought long and hard, talked to lots of folks, and I'm very excited for the folks that weren't appointed to Planning Commission for them to continue to stay involved with the town. So thank you all for your interest, but I'm excited to be appointing Dave Gove to continue on the Planning Commission. I've actually known Dave for 5 years. We went through the North Tahoe Truckee Leadership Program together back in 2016, I believe. So I got to know him then and got to know him as a very thoughtful person, takes a lot of time, puts in a lot of effort to make sure that the decisions he's making are the right ones for the future of Truckee. He also brings, some different perspectives to the table. So I think that was important as well in the conversations that the Planning Commission continues to have moving forward. I also think he's done a nice job as chair to help move things along sometimes. That's not always the easiest job, so I've appreciated that. So I look forward to continuing to work with him as he continues on the Planning Commission. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Romack, and welcome, Dave Gove. Councilmember Zabriskie, would you like to share your Planning Commission appointment with us as well?
Certainly. I appointed Nikki Riley very much based on her experience. She served as a planning commissioner from 2003 to 2007, helped developed the first general plan update. We're now faced with developing the second update, and she brings that history and experience to bear on what is a complicated issue right now. She also participated in development of the current housing element of the general plan as when she served on the Planning Commission more recently. She's been very active in community service organizations, including the Martis Fund, the Mountain Area Preservation, and the First Five Commission. In addition to that, she has served as a professional land use planner, and I consider that particularly important at this stage in the town's development.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie, and welcome all planning commissioners, new planning commissioners, returning planning commissioners. The service that you provide is invaluable to our community, so I want to get out ahead of that and say thank you in advance for all of your hard work, because it will be but it is so critically important to us, and we couldn't do what we do up here without you. So thank you. I'd also like to extend some gratitude to my fellow council members for going above and beyond your service and all of these duties that you have taken on, and meeting with additional people and advocating for our community. So thank you. I'll bore you real quickly with my list. Obviously, Nevada County Board of Supervisors meeting this morning, and a wealth of education about their community concerns. I've also engaged in some discussions with community leaders in South Lake Tahoe to try to collaborate a little bit more effectively on our regional climate effort. We had the mayors and managers meeting last week, which also unearthed some commonality on climate change actions, which I was very excited about. Discussions and idea sharing with the Visit Truckee Tahoe leadership. Always a pleasure to work with them. Meeting with our legislative advocacy team. They did a little introduction and education for me. It was really helpful. Met with District 5 Supervisor Bullock prior to our delivery to the full county or Board of Supervisors. Attended the City Selection Committee meeting where we appointed Jan Zabriskie to a couple of different, to LAFCO and the airport land use, and all the regular COVID meetings, including the Yuba.net weekly vaccine update, which I've found to be pretty interesting and informative. Okay, so with that, we are going to adjourn the regular Truckee Town Council meeting until March 9th, 2021, 5 p.m. will be our next meeting. And are we going to go right into opening up, or do we need to take a break while we make sure everybody is online?
Let's take a couple minutes, 5 minutes, to make sure everybody's available.
Okay, we will be back in 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I'm seeing faces pop up. Do we have, I think we're missing a few. Just gonna give it another.
I can't turn my camera on. Someone else has to turn it on.
Okay, Susie's camera. And do we have Commissioner Gove?
I am here.
Excellent. Okay. And there's Susie. Fantastic. Here we go. We are calling to order the Jorger Ranch Specific Plan Joint Town Council and Planning Commission Workshop. Judy, may we have roll call for both council and commissioners, please?
Yes. Councilmember Polity?
Yes, here.
Councilmember Zabriskie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Romack?
Here.
Mayor Kluvstad?
Here.
Chair Gove?
Here.
Vice Chair Tarnay?
Here.
Planning Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Planning Commissioner Freeman?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and it is my understanding that since we only have one agenda item on this workshop, we are officially opening public comment, and we will hear that public comment at the conclusion of the workshop presentation. So with that, is Jenna or Danielle kicking this off? Who's got it?
Get me tonight. And
all right.
We also have Jenna and Laura, so I will.
And Laura here too. Oh, there you are. I see you now.
We just want to make sure we had everyone available to answer any questions that you had. So let me go ahead and pull up my presentation.
And welcome, commissioners. Very exciting to do a joint session with you tonight.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I've figured it out and got our screen right this time versus last time. So we scheduled this joint workshop for the council and commission, in part because I think there's a lot of history with this plan that a lot of people aren't familiar with. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of have that refresher and take a step back in time before we go into talking about what kind of amendments the planning commission and council are talking about in the next month. So it's we're calling it Getting to Know the Plan, in part because there's more than 20 years worth of history that's gone into the point where we're at with the plan today. And many planners, many community members, and many decision makers have taken a look at this plan over the years. And so part of this will be a reflection of some of those iterations of the plan, but then a lot of it will focus on why we ended up with the information that we have in the plan, including some information about what specific plans are. So there's some land use information in here. There's some history. Hopefully we'll keep this at a very high level just because we can get into a lot of detail, but here we go. So we're not making any decisions tonight. This is really for educational purposes, informational purposes. We really want both council and commission to ask questions so that you can be informed. You can kind of get a better understanding of the evolution of the plan. And we'll talk about what's working and what's not working sort of towards the end when we talk about next steps. So what is a specific plan? I think everyone's familiar with our general plan because that's something that we use more frequently. But when we get into talking about specific plans and master plans, that's a little bit different. That it's sort of interesting to see why jurisdictions use them. But really the reason is because there's oftentimes a section of the community where there just needs to be a higher level of attention paid. Maybe there's some specific environmental constraints. There's a need to coordinate land uses and future anticipated businesses at a level that you couldn't get if you were only applying the development code and the general plan. So it's really an opportunity to do a more comprehensive, focused effort for those parts of your community where you really just want to have something unique, identified. You want to have some flexibility, some creativity. So we have obviously the Jorga Ranch specific plan area as a planned community, but other ones that we've done have been Gray's Crossing and then Coldstream. So when we kind of look at the town's evolution with our general plans, we had kind of set that stage that we weren't ready to plan everything all at once. So instead we said we'll look at these areas a little bit more closely. We do have requirements for specific plans to ensure that there's some consistency when you pick one up. You have to identify proposed land uses. You have to talk about infrastructure. You have to include implementation measures and the relationship to the general plan. So if you were to look at our specific plans, or you were to go to another city within California and pick up one of their specific plans, they're all required by state law to have these minimum standards included. So that's why it might seem like it's a little prescriptive in some ways, but it's to ensure that we kind of cover everything that you would need to be able to do that future development within these special areas. So like I said, there's been a lot of history, and I won't be able to get into all the details because, like I said, there's boxes and boxes and boxes of planning efforts that have gone into the evolution of the plan. Way back to when we were first working on the first general plan in 1996, where we identified this area for high intensity mixed use. And then we had property owners submitting what we called summary plans, which were really kind of concept plans as a precursor for specific plans back in 2001. And then several versions over the years to kind of incorporate different ideas. We had a variety of workshops, subsequent community plans. And then we got into the 2025 general plan efforts in about 2004 and kind of paused a bit in working and looking at the Jorga Ranch specific plan to kind of get additional feedback through that process before going into additional drafts, which were sort of the 2017 to 2014 years. And there was about one draft a year that was produced. So like I said, it's boxes and boxes of information. And I think you can just see that the community's been very passionate about land use over time, and that's been a consistency in our history, and it's kind of shown through in how we look at areas like this. But just for some context and some flavor, I did pull out some of the site planning work from a few earlier versions. This one I found interesting from 2007. So there was a summary plan associated with this, and Jen and I were both here when this was being worked on. Dwayne Hall, our previous town planner, was working on this at the time. And there really was a focus on having sort of this kind of regional network and shopping center, but it was actually on the other side of the highway from where we ended up with it. And it was interesting kind of looking at the evolution through the general plan process of how our thoughts and ideas about what these uses could be changed, that there was still a notion in 2007 of we have some uses downtown that could be placed maybe elsewhere to free up some of that land downtown, like the gas stations. There was still a recognition of some need for industrial space and talk about moving things off West River Street back in 2007. Looking at different housing types because we weren't getting a lot of multifamily units constructed. And then since I've been here, always a discussion about a grocery store and kind of having that third opportunity within the community at a part of town that didn't already have access to that. This one's even more conceptual, where we kind of took a step back in 2008 and did more of a bubble diagram of what some of the opportunities could be. So you can see there's, some open space that's pretty prevalent, still that mixed use kind of concept, but now it's on the other side of the highway than it was before. And the residential is starting to shift. And although there's still industrial in it, it's in different places. So through the dialogue in the community, through the feedback, through identification of constraints, this plan area has changed quite a bit over time. And I think that's just helpful for us to kind of see. When we jump forward into our planning process for what's the more current plan, this is where I sort of stepped in, which is why I'm doing the presentation tonight, because some of the work that went into this plan was when I was a project planner. So we thought it might be helpful to just have sort of that context. But it was really based on working between the staff and the property owners to come up with some idea that would be a little bit different than some of the previous versions of land use planning within this area. So part of that was based on the Tahoe Prosperity Plan, where there was really an emphasis on sort of the economics of our region, definitely a regional connotation, but then how to attract businesses that are different than our tourism base. And then within that, creating, which at the time we called them clusters, to really try and incentivize like businesses to be together. So on the screen here, you can see we had sort of three concepts for that. One was the regional based, one was what we called business innovation. And that really had more of a sort of technology, sort of green industry slant to it. And then the third one was lifestyle economic. And that wording evolved out of a recognition that Truckee has an outdoor lifestyle. And so there really was interest in kind of creating that sort of outdoor experience and having that continued, because there is a lot of that happens within the Brockway corridor. And then it was reemphasized when the Truckee River Winery was open within this area. So that's what started the foundation work for the plan that eventually got adopted. This was one of the earlier versions of some of the zoning that was being contemplated. And you can see that there's still, the biz is business innovation, the CL is the lifestyle commercial. So you can see these clusters come out in the way that the land use planning is put together. But there was a little bit more of kind of a business park emphasis, some more, I would say, highway commercial kind of thought process with what's called the CRS zoning, kind of around the Jorger-Soaring intersection. Really thinking about, is this an appropriate location to add some additional opportunities for businesses that could capture traffic on the highway? And this was used as part of a workshop setting for the community to kind of talk about appropriateness of uses. And it definitely changed before we got to what was adopted in 2015, which is the plan that we're using today. So again, kind of what I did to prepare for this presentation is I went back through a lot of our previous workshop public comments. I couldn't capture everything on the screen here because, like I said, it's boxes and boxes. But I do think that there are some key foundational concepts that were important to kind of recognize in the evolution of the plan itself. And like I mentioned in the previous slides, sort of the diversification for the economy was definitely a driver in trying to find opportunities to create new business opportunities for people who are here full time, but then also recognizing that we still have visitors and we still have part-time residents that equally could have opportunity to spend more of their dollars within the community. But there was definitely still concern about, this is a large part of the community that hadn't had anything developed on it yet. So would this be a site that a big box type of supercenter store would be interested in? And how do we kind of bridge the gap between what's happening downtown in kind of the pedestrian-oriented, walkable, small local shops versus something that's more service-oriented and capturing some of the retail leakage that was happening to other areas, particularly in Reno? And I think part of that was just looking at ways to be different and innovative within this area to, create something that the community would support and be proud of over time. So the ideas about having a grocery store, stayed within the themes throughout this planning. The notion of how do we get some of our businesses that are on West River Street or downtown that would be better situated sort of out in this area, how do we get them into this location? What are incentives that we could provide? And so those are some of the ideas that were, kind of common themes throughout this whole process. But a lot of them were community driven. In our general plan, we have a 40,000 square foot limit, and that came up for retail of specifically for grocery stores. Does that apply? Are we worried about that 40,000 square feet? Should it be more? Should it be less? If we allow for new uses in this area, are they going to compete with downtown, which was a huge concern? But then equally, is there going to create any sort of economic strain to the town itself? And how do we take that into consideration? There was a lot of discussion about open space because it's been undeveloped for so long. There's a lot of recognition in this area of just the beauty of it and the views and sort of the environmental quality that it has. And then also, the situating of the different zoning districts and the future land uses within these areas, recognizing that there are some constraints. That we've got some busy highways, we've got the airport in close proximity. There was just sort of an idea of how do we kind of walk through all these different sites, which are one project, but somewhat disjointed by Highway 267 to create something that still would work and be a good asset for the community. Aesthetics, which goes hand in hand with land use, that when you approve zoning, there's ultimately going to be businesses and buildings that are located there. And there was a real concern about this, Truckee's history of having sort of this strip mall kind of history of cars driving in and having all the buildings pushed to the back of the property, and recognizing that this really wasn't an area where the community wanted to see more highway oriented commercial. So they didn't want the big signs that you might see in other communities that are trying to sort of capture the traffic on the highway. They wanted to really make sure that this was a place and was in character with Truckee's small mountain town flavor that we have. But then also is sort of a deeper issue about the traffic that goes through this area, and ensuring that we're not, by whatever we create out in this area, not adding to sort of the strain on the bypass, which would necessitate having that go to 4 lanes. And so that's still in the general plan. That's still a policy. That was something that was significantly looked at in all the different versions of the plans here. But then as part of that, trying to figure out how do you connect the neighborhoods that are sort of on one side of the highway with the potential for grocery store and other uses on the other side of the highway when we don't really retain control of the highway. So those are things that drove some of these additional designs and concepts that ended up in the specific plan. So what else is in there that's of importance for us to consider when we look at projects in the specific plan area? So there's a vision, goals and policies, very similar to what you would expect to see in the general plan. They're more detailed, and I'll have some slides kind of going over those. The zoning districts were created, so I'll show you the map of that. There are development standards, and some of those are different than you would expect to see in the development code. There's also design guidelines, which were based on the development code. There's maps and graphics that show the infrastructure and the phasing of that. There's discussion about workforce housing, and then a little bit about the open space. So for the vision, and I just pulled this right out of the specific plan in the first section, but the vision really was to try and capture some of the uses that weren't being accommodated elsewhere within the community, but also to add a variety. So that was both commercial, and retail, but then industrial, and then workforce housing. It was really on this emphasis of Jorga Ranch being at this regional location, and recognition that we do get a lot of traffic that comes through that area, where it would be nice to be able to kind of capture those dollars within the community. For the goals and policies that are in there, what I did is I just pulled out the primary goals, because there's lots of different policies to talk about. But I think part of that is a recognition that this is really a unique opportunity, and that's sort of the lens that the community and the decision makers over time were looking at when we were working on this specific plan, is how do we kind of marry all these interests that the community has and sort of expectations, and what does that look like? And so making sure that there's some open space still preserved, looking at that trail network, like I said, looking at the character of what was going on Brockway Road already, and how to kind of reinforce that, bringing in Truckee's uniqueness, that outdoor experience kind of perspective within this, and then opportunities for additional industrial land. So as part of that, I actually went back through all the 2025 general plan policies too, just to refresh myself about what we had in there. And it's not surprising. I mean, these are all the things that I just talked about, that, range of uses, not having strip commercial, making sure we're not doing 4 laning, and providing the workforce housing. So you can see how the general plan policies got reworded slightly, but then incorporated in the specific plan into some of these goals to ensure that there was consistency between the two, but that it was really carrying forward through a deeper level with the policies that ultimately got implemented. Other things that were included were about transit, because there was interest in making sure that we could add some additional transit in this area and being able to support the transit. Looking at that workforce housing and kind of trying to figure that out, knowing that there was a lot of discomfort by commercial businesses at the time to put in housing as part of their projects. There just wasn't something that they were familiar with. And so kind of working through that concern. And then again, sort of this kind of juxtaposition of downtown versus this not being downtown and what that meant for opportunities for diversifying the economy, capturing those regional dollars. So that's kind of where the biz zone got some of that background too, was within these general plan policies about economics, about trying to figure out what things were missing in other areas and could we kind of incentivize new businesses to open or expand within this area where they weren't able to do that in other places. So this is the adopted zoning map that was included in this specific plan. So versus the one that I showed you a couple slides ago, you can see how there's much more open space that was incorporated into the final version. And then there's a much more prominent yellow area, which is the multifamily housing site. And so I'll have some slides about that too, but that was an evolution in the discussion about the workforce housing. And I think you can just kind of see how there really was this blending of different lane uses, but then also within that, still recognizing that economic cluster interest. So what I thought it would be helpful is to just walk through a little bit about each of the different zoning districts, because as I mentioned in the beginning, these aren't typical zoning districts that Truckee had. So these are unique and only found right now in the Dorger Ranch specific plan. And that's the benefit of creating a specific plan, is that you can come up with something that's different to meet the very specific needs. So for the area we're talking about now under general commercial, there was 2 different zoning districts created, the regional commercial and lifestyle commercial. And one of the concepts that was included within the plan was something called targeted uses, which was really based on an economic analysis that was prepared and actually tiered off of the rail yard master plan, because these plans were being worked on almost simultaneously. And so they were in some ways informing each other, but they were also part of the larger community dialogue that was going on at the time of what do we want in the rail yard versus what do we want out at Dorger? And if we could create incentives to put those uses in the different locations, then in a lot of ways they would support each other. So that was one of the ideas behind sort of creating these targeted uses. I will say that, lesson learned, they're not required. So that is something that we recognize that, yeah, it would be great to have them, but there isn't anything that says you have to build into any of these uses. It was really just to highlight that if someone was looking for an opportunity to build a new building and would be looking at creating new business opportunities, could they incentivize and have some of these businesses go in? So for the lifestyle commercial, again, really with that sort of outdoor lens of creating opportunities to have interactions outside. So a nursery, you could have outdoor dining, sort of displays, some sort of recreation. And that was a reflection of what the winery was doing. And so the idea was, could we keep that going? There was also another opportunity with the smaller piece that's sort of detached from everything. It's the 2.7 acre piece, to have a sort of community-driven space that could facilitate a lot of the community's nonprofits. And so that was also included as a targeted use, although it may not have had sort of that same outdoor recreation. But because it was community-based, there was an understanding that that would provide community benefit, which was sort of the same idea of having some of the outdoor spaces identified. And then when you move over to the regional commercial, so this is where the Rayleigh's is constructed now. This is the site where there was discussion about, is there going to be competition with downtown? And that really was one of the major lenses that was used in kind of figuring out what could be allowed over here. And in all these zoning districts in the Georgia Ranch specific plan, if you were to pull out the development code land use table where it says what you can and can't do, and you pull out the Georgia Ranch, they're very different. So we virtually went line by line, use by use, and said yes, no, to tailor it for what we thought was appropriate in this area at the time that the plan was being developed. So things that kind of matched up between community expectations and the economic study that was done was really trying to find spaces for some of these larger stores that you wouldn't put downtown because they don't physically fit. They're not going to fit into a commercial row retail space. They need larger spaces, things like gyms, furniture stores, that just, don't physically fit elsewhere, but are things that people are, doing outside of the area or could be better accommodated in a space like Georgia that had the land to do it. Within that, though, to kind of get into the community's concern about the superstores, the big box stores, there is a policy that was included to talk about doing an economic impact analysis for any single retail tenant of 15,000 square feet or larger. And that didn't include the grocery store. And I will say that Mountain Hardware was less than 15,000 square feet, but had they been, then they would have been put into this category. And part of the reasoning behind that is we as a community can't say, we don't like you, business X, because of your name or your business practices or whatever it is. But we can say we have concern about if there's going to be any sort of economic impact to our community based on a use coming in. We're having to somehow subsidize it in ways that we as a community weren't expecting. And so that was the purpose behind creating this policy for an economic impact analysis that was within our legal means to at least recognize that some of these businesses that might be interested in square footage of this size may not be totally compatible with the community. And it would give us an opportunity to have the Planning Commission talk about what those businesses are. So beyond the more commercial concepts that we had and that we included into the land use plan, it was also to include manufacturing, industrial, and business innovation. And I think the business innovation for a lot of people has been the most confusing because I think it sounds like it could be very heavily industrial, but the best on the ground example that we have is Pioneer Commerce Center. That Pioneer Commerce Center was originally an area that was designated for industrial, but because of the plan development that was approved for it, it's evolved into much more of a business park that has some industrial businesses, but really has a mix of kind of office, there's gym facilities, there's some, places with roll-up doors that kind of do need that additional space to make noise. It's not quite the same as strictly office, but it's a mix of uses. And so that's really what the business innovation was modeled after, but then taking it even a step further to have this opportunity for businesses that we weren't getting within the community heavily. So whether it was, sort of tech industries and creating more of a business park for them where they could actually do their research and development and have their offices together. So needed some warehouse space, some office space, greenhouse farming or green technology, again, where there's a little bit of a mix between being a little bit louder than a typical office use, but having benefit also in being surrounded by similar businesses or businesses that are like-minded. And that goes back to that economic cluster concept. Which then takes us to the evolution of the discussions about affordable housing within the Georgia Ranch specific plan. And the way that the plan is written right now, there is no inclusionary housing that's required. The workforce housing was looked at as the plan area as a whole. And so this was something that was very different than what we had been working under before. I think we're all very used to the idea if you come in with a non-residential project, we're going to look at the square footage, and then we're going to apply, your workforce housing based on the number of employees that you're generating, and then you would be responsible for building that. Same with inclusionary, you have so many units, 15% of those you would set aside for housing, for workforce housing. But again, the times were different when we were working on this plan, that the economics were a huge driver. We were working on this through the economic downturn, through the recession. And so the community just wanted to have some new economic investment. And so one of the hurdles that, again, had been expressed by whether it was developers, the property owner, was just this struggle of trying to attract businesses that just weren't sure how to work through the workforce housing, and then how to integrate housing into some of these projects where you've got a highway on one side, an airport on the other side, and they just weren't sure at the time how that could look. And so it evolved into this concept of, well, if we kind of looked at what the requirements would be for a full build out of the specific plan area, came up with that number, and then carved out a portion of the property for that, would that work? And so that's the evolution of what we call the workforce multifamily residential site, which has a minimum of 18 units an acre and a maximum of 20. So between 72 and 80 units. And it's different in that we also added within that some different development standards. And that was supposed to be the incentive. It was affordable by design and concept. So the first time that we were looking at that, in part because no one had been building any kind of multifamily attached housing in Truckee for years of the scale that would actually accommodate housing for our need at the time. So some of those differences were including some size limitations for units. So we don't have that elsewhere. So the 400 to 1,000 square feet with a cap on the number of 1,000 square foot units, a requirement that there was a mix of units of studio 1 and 2 bedroom, full-time occupancy with no short-term rentals. So again, walking back through that, this work was happening in 2012, 2013. The short-term rental discussion is not back then what it is today. And so I think there was some concepts of things that led us to where we are now. But again, because it was coming, out of the recession and into the recession when we were working on this, the thought process was very different. Reduced parking standards, reduced private and common open space, reduced setbacks, reduced site coverage. And all of that was built into the development standards so that when someone looked at this property at the time, given everything else that was available on the market, this property looked a lot easier to build on. It had a lot more flexibility already built into it. So a little bit of fast forwarding, we've seen some challenges obviously with this, that at the time there wasn't a drive to say that you totally had to build your workforce housing requirement in line with the commercial construction that was happening. We did come up with a policy, which I include on the screen here, to at least slow down so that once a certain level of development happened, then that would trigger this property being built. But I don't think at the time we ever anticipated that no one would come in and build these units, because the incentives that were built in were just different than anywhere else. And it seemed like it would have been enough of a good project for someone to just want to do it. So that's our wishful thinking at the time. And we're struggling, right now with sort of what this 40% means, because we do have construction that's happened and we have projects that have been built, and the demand now by the employees who've been generated by these projects has not been met concurrent with when the housing is being constructed. So this is really detailed, but I think it's just helpful to kind of pull it out of the specific plan to show that the idea really was to take all the properties together, the 0.2 floor area ratio for all the land, the full development potential, calculate, the maximum workforce housing that would be generated, use the RMW property as a portion of it, and then capture the remaining portion of it with in lieu fees, so that as projects came in, they were just working on their own projects and then paying the in lieu fee, but it had a very predictable path for them to go in. And these just show you some of what we've included in the plan as far as the calculation for the number of units. And I foresee us asking questions about that, so I just wanted to have those in there in case there's specific questions. But then the other component, which was the last zoning district that was included, was about the open space. And again, these areas, as you saw in the evolution of the plan over time, had a variety of different uses shown on them that weren't open space. There's some drainage in the 12.2 acre property that was difficult to kind of align with some of the development plans. There were some view sheds the community was concerned about. And so ultimately, this is the configuration that got incorporated into the zoning with a P on it. So we don't have that anywhere else, which is to designate it as permanent open space. And then the uses that I show on the screen here are the only uses that are allowed within these areas. So it's pretty limited. It's really meant to be in its sort of natural state, excluding some public trails, which have already been constructed, and some other things like snow storage that could happen in this area. And the plan also, because we were trying to figure out, feasibility of developing these properties, knowing that there was a lot of infrastructure that would be required, how to kind of break out the infrastructure requirements among all the properties so that it wasn't just one parcel taking the burden of that, and then, the remaining parcels getting the benefit of it without also contributing. And what I didn't mention in here too is, as part of the planning for the industrial and some of these infrastructure improvements that we were talking to Truckee Tall Lumber at the time and trying to figure out, if there were businesses similar to that wanted to relocate in the area, could we build in some incentives within the plan to accommodate that? And some of the infrastructure was sort of removed off of the site that ultimately ended up being Truckee Tall Lumber and redistributed so that some of that was just easier for them to come in and created more of an incentive for them to be able to relocate. But you can see here that there's a variety of different things that were required depending on which section, which parcel you're talking about, between trails to the roundabout to the 267 improvements, bike paths, and then the timing of those was specified through all these maps that are included in the plan. And then making sure that the parcels that were open space did not have the same level of requirement for infrastructure, because we knew that that would not have any development on it in the future. So again, I kind of talked about, that the plan changed quite a bit between, obviously from when the first general plan was adopted all the way up until 2013. But I think the core of the work that happened was really during the recession. And so it's a little bit hard to look at it from today's lens, because our needs in the community now are very different than they were back then. That there really was a lot of concern about sort of the town's longevity and kind of economic stability without trying to attract new commercial businesses and new investment. So that was really a driver in how this came about, still within Truckee's small town character, still recognizing all of the community input that had gone into the planning within this area, and really looking at how do we help support the locals that are here, whether that's providing new job opportunities, different types of jobs, new business locations, all those things. But also recognizing that we were losing a lot of money to surrounding areas for, a part of town which we thought we could capture some of that. So creating that balance and opportunity, and recognizing, like I said, that we had been working on the rail yard master plan, and that had a very heavy housing emphasis, working on the Coldstream plan, very, housing emphasis, to look at this as much more of a commercial site, to kind of balance out what the community needs were overall. So what are some of the successes that have happened so far? So Truckee Tahoe Lumber relocation is a success for us, because that has now freed up an opportunity downtown to repurpose that site into something that would enhance the rail yard master plan. And the relocation was talked about within both plans, both the Jorger Ranch specific plan and the rail yard master plan, as an opportunity, as were other sites along West River Street and some other sites within the Historic Preservation Overlay District, that if there was, like, for example, a gas station that wanted to relocate out here, that would have been another success from the perspective of the specific plan. A lot of infrastructure improvements went into this, between the 267 improvements that happened, the trails, the Soaring Ranch roundabout, and then the grocery store and an additional opportunity for Mountain Hardware to expand, in addition to some new commercial leasing spaces that are coming up. So again, looking at from the lens of what the intent of the plan was to create these new opportunities, these are some of the successes that did happen. also, we've had some challenges. So now that we've had the benefit of time to kind of work through some of the projects and implement the plan, there are some things that just were never fully fleshed out within the plan, in part because we just wanted to get something on the ground. We just wanted to have something to get developers interested in being able to get the property owners the ability to sell the land and attract someone to come and build something. Like I mentioned, housing now is very different than it was then when we were in the recession. People weren't really looking heavily on buying houses because they were worried about their jobs and how long they were going to be able to keep going. And so it's very different now, where we also have COVID. We have sort of unknown impacts from sort of the short and long-term implications of what that means to us as a community. We have new community members here. We just have different interests than we did before. Retail is definitely not what it was back in 2008 to 2013. There's just so many things that have changed that even though, because we adopted the plan in 2015, it's just very different. And so I think that's part of why we brought forward for the commission and council to talk about this. Is there's some things that we think we could amend to make this, that much more successful, but true to the community engagement, true to the comments, true to the interests of the plan originally. The workforce housing is definitely one of the major issues. So Jenna reminded me to include in here about the lawsuit over Soaring Ranch, really primarily based on the lack of workforce housing being constructed concurrent with the project itself. And although, the town won in that case and, proved that it wasn't necessary, it didn't mean that it wasn't an issue for us to go back and look at again. So that's partly why we're talking about it. And other things that the community considers more important now than then, at least outwardly facing, not that we weren't concerned, but climate change for sure has had a much higher level of community dialogue than it has in the past. Some other things include this discussion about large floor plates. So the intent of creating that 5,000 square foot minimum was specific to the concerns raised by the downtown merchants and other community members about competition with downtown, but it's almost reversing itself at this point, where now there's concern that it's going to keep out the opportunity for locally owned and operated businesses to have new spaces to go to, and may attract sort of a more chain, regional, sort of non-local based business to come and set up shop. And it may not serve the same kind of daily needs of the community like there was thought would happen in this area. The concept of targeted uses, those ideals of what we saw within the economic strategy and kind of looking at what we thought could go in here, because they're not required, there's not really an incentive built in to have those businesses go. So is that still relevant? When does the workforce housing project get triggered and who builds it? And although we've had a lot of interest lately within the planning division by various prospective buyers calling us and asking, what they can do within that property. And our understanding is that there are some people who actually want to be in contract over this property. There isn't that trigger that we're used to within our development to kind of have the timing match up with when the employees are being generated and when the housing for them is available. So something for us to look at again. And then just the amount of housing, that's definitely not something that we expected. We really only looked at 97 units within the environmental impact report originally, thinking that it would accommodate the workforce housing site, but then some, few units sprinkled in that maybe some smaller businesses would want to add, similar to what we see off of Industrial Way. But we never anticipated that this would be a site in this last version of the plan where multifamily housing would be something that would be contemplated. And then other things that are specific to the community's interest about, who we are, our character, our authenticity, really go back to sort of the design standards and making sure that it doesn't become a strip mall, that we have, some very clear expectations. And because of recent state law about housing, which is again why we're going back through and creating these objective design standards in the general plan, we equally need to put them into the Jordan Ranch specific plan over time too, so that it's very clear when a developer comes in, these are the things you shall do, and there's no discretion in there. So we're missing those currently. I have to say I had to keep this very high level because I want to try and keep it around a half hour, but I know that I've glossed over a lot of these concepts and that there's a lot of information in here. So if there's questions, we can always pull back up slides, or like I said, we have Jenna, Laura, and myself to answer any of these questions. But it's really just an opportunity, again, to get some of that background information, to ask the why, and then be able to go back in and look at the plan, maybe with some new insight that you might not have had previously. Knowing that the Planning Commission will be talking about this on Monday, March 1st, with the council, again, talking about it on March 23rd. So with that, I'll go ahead and end the slideshow so that we can see everyone's faces again. And that's it for me.
Well, thank you very much, Danielle. That was a walk-through time for sure. At this point, we're gonna ask questions, and then we'll or do we want to consider public comment? Have we received any? At this point, we have received one. Okay, we'll go ahead and listen to that, and then Chair Gov, if you would like to lead your commission through questions after that, I think that would be great.
Yeah, sure. You want to start with us on the questions?
Yeah, let's listen to this public comment, and then we'll jump right in.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jill Mitchell, and I am calling about agenda item 4.1. I am part of the Ponderosa Martis Neighbors United group. We have some major concerns about the potential for increased traffic and significant negative changes to our neighborhood. We would like to request that you involve our neighborhood in the planning process, and that you also consider maintaining some of Parcel 4 as open space for our Truckee community and for the Truckee Airport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that it, Judy?
That's it.
Great. Okay. Chair Gov.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start with questions. Well, it's just for staff tonight. So, Susie, would you like to start with any questions you may have?
Sure. Thank you. So my first question is sort of what discretion do we have as a deciding body? Do we get to pick it and it happens, sort of blanket discretion at whatever we can come to, or only what we can get accepted by the property owners?
Jenna's been working with the property owners, so they're aware of this meeting tonight. They have also been in all the prior discussions. So I think they're interested in what ideas and direction the Planning Commission has to go in. Andy would also like to say something. I see him popped up.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have to get the property owners to be completely okay with whatever changes we might like to make. But there are some limits on what we can do. So, for example, we would not be able to deny the owners all economically viable use of the property, because that would be a taking, and then we'd have to pay them for the property. So the idea of rezoning something from biz or manufacturing to pure open space, that would require some research to see if that's something we could do without it being a taking. But no, we don't have to sort of get the owners to completely sign off. But that being said, of course, we do want to try to work with them, as Danielle said. And ideally, we would want changes to the specific plan to both serve the needs of the community and work well for the property owners.
Well, and I will just add too that the council gave direction for us to look at this in a two-part process. And so the first part that the Planning Commission will look at is more focused on the housing topic, with the option of us coming back with a second phase so that we can look at things that are kind of maybe going to take a little bit more time or would be better integrated into the discussions happening with the general plan. So I think that may help too, and just kind of how the commission and council will look at going through some of these changes.
I forgot to mute myself. Okay. Thank you. And then I just, kind of going way back, I wanted to ask what the relationship to the plan is from those original 8 formation policies, or the foundation policies. I don't know if that makes sense.
Are you talking about from the general plan? or from one of the summary?
No, there were 8 policies that this was based on, that the specific plan was based on. And so can we go back to those policies, I guess is what I'm asking. One of those policies that I brought up in the planning commission meeting was that it was supposed to house 50% of the workforce that was created in these projects. So can we go back to that and do something as radical as that?
You mean change that policy language to have a different intent? Is that what you're asking?
Nope. Oh. No, that policy language is already existing.
Okay, I'm not sure. Danielle, do you understand what?
Yeah, I think that was out of the 2025 general plan, so I could try and pull that up and see if that's what that's from, but.
So I guess
it was listed as,
trying to understand, are you saying you want to change the language or change the way it's implemented?
To me, it seems like in the evolution of how this plan evolved, that policy was watered down to a drastic amount. And so do we have the capability to go back to that foundation policy that's listed in the general plan as one of the 8 and implement something that much more strong?
So I did pull up the 2025 general plan land use element, and the policy, which is listed under the PC3 policy, so it's P6, does say, and this is what got translated into the specific plan, that the plan shall include provisions for supplying on-site the required housing for 50% of the very low, and moderate income workforce associated with the development. So I think your question is, the direction that ultimately got adopted was an interpretation of this. The times have changed. Can we go back to this foundational policy and have that discussion again? And I would say yes.
Yes, I agree
great
as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think that's all my questions for right now. Thank you so much.
Okay, Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I just have a few. First off, what was the involvement of the airport in the creation of this plan, given that it positions housing near the runway?
So there was a lot of dialogue with the airport about the plan, between showing them different versions, talking to them about what their expectation was for their own property themselves, having the Land Use Commission take a look at it before it was adopted, and then sort of their interest in things that they might want to keep lower density versus higher density. And so there were some maps incorporated into the specific plan to try and balance interest in having housing, but then also knowing that we had some compatibility issues with the airport. So there was quite a bit of dialogue that went on with the airport, including a lot of the adjacent property owners over in the Reynolds neighborhood who also were involved in those conversations.
But the airport eventually signed off on a version of the plan that allowed housing as a conditional use in phase 2.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned, thank you. That was the first question. You mentioned that housing wasn't contemplated, was the word you used, but it was allowed as a conditional use. And that's ultimately why we thought we had to approve it, right?
Yeah, it wasn't contemplated at the scale that we've been talking about more recently. So it was more on that RMW property with, like I said, up to 97 units. And so when the discussions, for example, with the airport happened and the community was talking about it, it was at a very, small amount. The general plan did specify that you could do 12 units an acre because that's what all sort of commercial land within the general plan allowed for. So it was a bit of a carryover from that.
That makes sense. I guess I'm wondering, given that I know this plan predates the state law about that limits resistance to housing to public safety issues, but given that the airport is potentially a public safety issue, I guess I don't understand how there was so much leeway about how much housing could be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's digging way back in that because the general plan had already allowed for it, that was probably the first point of conversation with the airport district was, we already have this general plan that says that this is a maximum density that can be considered within this area. And then that we kind of overlaid what the airport's restrictions were within that area to block out sort of the zones, like the B1, B2, I think is what it was called in the plan of, gee, housing within this area really isn't going to work from a compatibility standpoint, but we could sort of take that ability and move that sort of in the other areas.
Yeah, and I'll just add that it's difficult to cite a public safety justification for denying housing when the airport itself has signed off on it and when the general plan allows for it. As Danielle mentioned, and I'll just explain a little more detail, there are different kinds of zones near airports, and there are different restrictions in different zones. So off the end of the runway, the restrictions are pretty great, but once you get kind of off to the sides of the runways, the restrictions are not quite as significant. So the housing in this area, it is consistent with, with all the restrictions that go with airports. The airport did sign off on it. The Airport Land Use Commission signed off on it, and it's a use that works. And so that's why it's difficult to say, oh, well, public safety justifies saying no to it.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it makes me like it more because there's a lot of, oh, it's too close to the airport, we couldn't possibly, but there were numbers, like a linear process derived this conditional use, and I'm glad to see that, I guess. It's helpful to have the background.
The nutshell version, if anybody asks any members of the council or commission about how can you allow housing this close to the airport, it's not proximity to the airport alone that makes housing not okay or not safe. It really is the location in relationship to the runway.
And they have I've seen a map that designated this area as Zone D, Zone A being where the planes come down right before they land, and Zone D being maybe off to the side or further away. So that was helpful for me to understand as we got going. So thank you for this background on that. Another question, there was some talk about, thank you, Andy. There was some talk about the impetus and the challenge in attracting interest to the space. It's a difficult project. I understand we're a town with very high standards. I can see a lot of tools to be able to drive up interest, and making the project site more favorable, reducing restrictions is one, but has staff just done a survey or asked developers what the challenges are? And are there any more process things? Because I mean, we talked to them 3 times for phase 2. I'm sure there may be some structural or process changes that would perhaps reach the same outcome of having development happen on schedule, but without having to sacrifice some of our design preferences.
Yeah, I mean, in this specific example, though, the infrastructure was one of the major challenges because a project like this oftentimes is done by one master developer. And what we had was some property owners with some property who they didn't want to be the master developer necessarily. They wanted to sell off the land and have someone else come in and do it, and weren't convinced that they would get one master developer. So part of that evolution in the plan was kind of listening to what their interests were, since we were working on it together as, kind of an open dialogue, along with the community input of trying to figure out, how do we break down the infrastructure challenge as sort of the major one. It wasn't so much about the town's process of, the planning department's taking too long, or, construction costs are so high, or building permits are expensive and the process takes longer than we wanted. It wasn't at that level.
Okay.
But, talking in general, yes, I mean, I think there's always opportunity for us to look at our processes to see if we can find ways to be more efficient or, better able to meet the needs of the development community.
And it's only up to me to hint and the council here to decide what they want to do with that. And my last question is, why are we having this conversation now? Is there something coming up soon that we need to pay attention to? What are the steps for this moving forward?
So we're talking about it now because in part, we kind of saw the Planning Commission in their discussions over the second phase of Soaring Ranch struggle with the implementation. And so I think just from a staff perspective, when something's not working, it's much better for us to just work with that in the immediate term than to set it aside because we may never get to it again. So that's really what the driver was in kind of looking at the timing. The next steps would be for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on these phase 1 changes that the council's asked for specific to the housing discussion on the 1st. So that would be a recommendation, and then council would have their final action on those changes on March 23rd. But then we
haven't seen those yet.
You haven't seen those, Laura. Laura's written the staff report, so you'll be getting that soon. She's been all Jorger Ranch all the time lately. She's our Jorger Ranch planner. So you'll see those and be able to we'll talk those through on the 1st. But then, like I said, there's still a subsequent discussion that will have to happen for sort of the other phase 2 fixes that we had presented to the council.
Awesome. I appreciate you instigating this background session and everyone else for making the time to have it. Thank you.
Commissioner Freeman.
Yeah, Danielle, thank you for the very detailed presentation. That was great. You kind of answered my question there at the end. It was really, what kind of framework are you as staff going to provide for us for our meeting next week to set us up for success, so we have some kind of guidelines for our conversation? It's not just here's a blank piece of paper and start from scratch, which I don't think you would do to us.
No, we have a staff report, and it'll have some recommendations within that to help with your discussion.
And that'll be on Thursday. We'll probably get that.
Yes, Laura's nodding yes.
Okay, that was kind of my biggest question.
It's on my homework list for tomorrow.
No pressure. Yeah, Dan, that was my biggest question too. So with that, I don't have any other questions. I again thank all of my planning commissioners for asking thoughtful questions and getting a lot of them out of the way. And we'll hand it back off to Mayor Klostad.
Thank you, Chair Gove. I believe we have one text comment that has come in.
Yes. So this comment is from Matt Miller at the Jorga Ranch Specific Plan Workshop. Planning Commissioner Freeman has stated that he is personally interested in building housing on the RMW-20 parcel of the Jorga Ranch Specific Plan. Should he even attend the workshop, as he should not be making decisions regarding housing on Jorga Ranch because of his professional interest? Must he not recuse himself? Matt Miller.
Thank you, Matt. See Andy popping up.
Hello. I took Commissioner Freeman's remark to be not anything like a firm commitment that he was going to buy the property. Just sort of, wow, someone really needs to build on it. Shoot, I could build on it. So I don't think that he has to recuse himself simply because, he's in that line of work and he did say, well, yeah, I could build. He's not under contract. As far as I know, he's not imminently going to purchase any of these parcels. As far as I know, the Jorga family does have other developers lined up. If Commissioner Freeman's interest ripens into something more than just kind of off the cuff, that would be a conversation that we'd have. But I just think it's too remote, too tenuous, and too hard to foresee at this point to require any kind of recusal. But Commissioner Freeman, if you have anything to add, I'm sure that would be of interest.
Sure. I think my actual comment was that I had looked at developing that property and I didn't think it was feasible. And so I have no interest in developing the RMW property. I think it's a very, very challenging parcel to make happen. And honestly, I think maybe there's an opportunity for us to find a way to look at that parcel and the rest of the Yoga Ranch to see if there's a way we can make it attractive for other developers to go in there and actually build some housing.
Right, so there you have it. I mean, no current interest by Commissioner Freeman in developing that parcel at all.
Thank you, Commissioner Freeman, and thank you, Andy, for always working so hard to make sure we are in alignment with all laws and regulations. Okay, with that, we'll jump to council, and we have 2 prior commission members on council, so I'm looking forward to hearing from them. Council Member Pallavi, would you like to start?
Sure. I don't necessarily have any questions. I'm well aware of kind of where we are on this, so I appreciate everybody's involvement on that. And I also think I'm having some internet issues making my back and forth a little challenging. So I pass on my questions and look forward to seeing what the commission comes up with next week. Thank you, Mayor Klostad.
Thank you, Councilmember Pallavi. Councilmember Zabriskie, do you have questions?
Yes, Danielle, I realize there's a lot wrapped in this question I'm going to ask, but I'm going to try it anyway. Is there a better place in Truckee that would foster businesses that would cushion downturns in the construction industry and tourism, that would provide a new home for businesses that are currently on West River, and that would provide a non-tourism sense of community for those members of Truckee who would like to see a different sense of community than tourism?
I think it would probably require redevelopment of some of our existing land, or potentially increasing what would be allowed in some of the already developed areas like Pioneer Commerce Center. Most of Pioneer Commerce Center is sort of built out to the maximum that we allowed, when it was approved. But if we wanted to increase that, then potentially you could get some, additional second floor or other opportunities in that area. But we are pretty constrained as far as what we have for vacant land. So it would be at that redevelopment level where, could you take a portion of like the Save Mart Shopping Center, for example, and rethink that into something else that could better capture, businesses that might have some noise that could match up with the railroad property next door or something like that. So it's been something we've been thinking about with the general plan update as far as what those sites are.
Okay. And then an even harder question is, do we know that we've exhausted the ability to foster economic diversification and a home for West River people? This is something the developer ought to know, certainly much better than a planner is going to know. I realize this is economics, but can you give it your best shot?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges that we've had with a lot of the businesses on West River Street is that they rent their spaces. And so for someone to come in and do the investment to build a new site may not be that business. It might be a build to suit with an option, but then the rent becomes that much more expensive because it's a new location. And so that's something that we've been trying to work through is, some of them have very unique needs, whether it's doing tire change out or welding or things that are noisy. That they are sort of not at the level of business success where they can come in and finance, a multi-million-dollar building, similar to what Quality Automotive did. I mean, they did that themselves and it's a great project, but not everyone is sort of at that level. And that's been our experience in our discussions with a lot of the West River businesses is that they're there because it's more affordable and it kind of fits the needs that they have. So one of the things we would have to figure out is, exactly what kind of spaces a developer could come in and build for, how much per square foot, and see if we could back into creating some zoning regulations that would kind of fit that need.
And we haven't been approached, you're not aware of any big tech groups, someone like Clear Capital wanting to come back in to occupy those spaces?
Since I've been here, we've had on again, off again discussions with different tech companies. At one point, a data center was contemplated for a Droger Ranch specific plan, which wasn't something that we were supportive of because it's kind of a dead use that, the only people that go in there are the ones who are kind of mining the data. And it really didn't have that level of community interaction that we were looking for. We've had people like Nike that we've talked to in the past about doing a performance training center here. So there's been dialogue, but we have not been actively recruiting to see, if any of the companies would come. And now under COVID, with a lot of them working remotely, it's sort of an unknown. They're not necessarily looking to build office spaces, but they are looking to have their employees, be able to have different lifestyles than they did before. So that's the sort of COVID world that we're balancing as we work through this.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. Vice Mayor Henderson, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you. Danielle, I just want to understand, I guess adequately understand sort of the boundaries of this conversation and the boundaries of what commission will deliberate on next week. So are we only focused on sort of the housing specific potential amendments, if you will, to the specific plan? I know we talked about a phase 2, but I think some of my questions aren't specific to housing, and I want to get your temperature on that.
This is a question and answer about the whole plan, so I would not limit to just housing. Yeah, go ahead and ask.
Okay. And then what's our timeline for a potential phase 2 if we do decide that there is additional work that we want to do around amendments after sort of the phase 1, if you will?
So our plan was to jump right into those, in part because we're working through the land use alternatives portion of the general plan update with our GPAC members. And so those are conversations that we thought could match up pretty well together. We may not have everything fully flushed out, but our intent is really to keep moving forward with those in tandem.
Okay, great. A couple more questions. One of the goals that you talked about was, economic diversification. You specifically referenced encouraging high tech in the biz zone. But did I hear you say that there aren't specific incentives to encourage that? I guess what was sort of the goal to how we would actually be encouraging that?
Yeah, we didn't get that far. I really wish we had more concept of it, but we were still unsure as a community of how to balance recognizing that construction and tourism were our biggest industries, but always wanting to have, higher wage year-round jobs and how to do that. And so one of the things that we realized we didn't have was kind of this business park that, could be a new location site for some of those tech companies. So it was really by creating the zoning that we thought we might create an incentive, but there wasn't really anything else that went with that to say, come see us and open up a new shop here.
Okay.
Well, I would argue, though, that the zoning and the infrastructure requirements are in place, and so is the CEQA process.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, the project is shovel-ready. Forgive me for using that term, but a lot of the underlying work that's required to get land use going in a community has already been done. So there is that. But certainly there's not a long list of incentives built into the biz zone to try to attract someone from somewhere else to come to Truckee.
And we did have conversations with a lot of local businesses. I mean, I think there's, yes, there's tech companies that aren't here, but there were a lot of businesses here that were interested in growing or didn't have the space that they needed to do some of their new ideas that they wanted to do. And solar was one of those ideas that we had a company who was interested in manufacturing panels, but couldn't find a space to go. And we're looking at something that had a little bit more land. And so, when we were looking at the clustering, that was sort of part of that background was, well, what are these businesses that we have that, we could actually foster versus just trying to attract from outside the area?
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I guess pivoting a bit to housing, I know, the trigger was sort of 40% of the specific plan, plan wide had to be built out in order to start, pouring those foundations for workforce housing. What percent of the specific plan do we estimate has been built out just with phase one? I imagine it's relatively small as we think about the plan in its entirety.
Laura, do you remember off the top of your head? I mean, we're pretty close.
If we include residential and non-residential, I think it was about 200,000 square feet, if I'm right. And then it would be about 130,000 if you excluded the residential that was just approved.
So that includes Soaring Ranch phase one. That's
so how close does that get us? Yeah. Sorry, Jenna, you were saying that's just for phase one.
Phase one, phase two was approved about last week, and then Truckee Tahoe Lumber.
And so how close does that combined get us towards the 40%, just out of curiosity?
So it depends on, this is one of the questions that the commission will be looking at next week is the number based on total build out, or is it based on non-residential build out? Because those are obviously two very different numbers.
Right.
So we'll have them talk about that.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I will say, yes, we have to fix that. And that's definitely something we're talking about. But the intent, again, going back to that economic lens, was to allow that CR parcel to develop without having triggered the housing requirement. But acknowledging that beyond that, someone else was going to trigger it.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. And then Danielle, in your presentation, you noted that there are some new state laws limiting the town's ability to regulate housing. What are those, and where might we be constrained, I guess, on this front?
So there's multiples, but I'll just give you kind of the big picture. Really, we wouldn't be able to down zone and take away the 12 units an acre. So that's kind of the biggest one.
Okay.
So we would need to figure out, if we're saying it's not appropriate in one area, is it more appropriate in another portion of the plan as an alternative? That's really the biggest one that we have to think about.
There's also been changes to something called the Housing Accountability Act that's been around for quite some time, but that's gotten even more stringent on what we can and can't do with respect to density and denial of housing projects. So there's definitely some stronger housing policies that are in place today than there were back in 2015.
But they don't limit our ability to say, if you're going to do housing, you also have to do commercial or industrial with it. So that's where we have some flexibility.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Henderson and Councilmember Romack.
Thank you. A lot of great questions have already been asked and answered, so I appreciate that. Danielle, I think you showed on your slide the total in lieu fees would be 821,000. And so you're shaking your head, yes. So was the intent that those in lieu fees would go to the developer of RMW, or not necessarily those would just be in the housing fund for future?
Yeah, the council didn't want to restrict them to be available just within the Georgia Ranch specific plan, because there could have been another project that came along that they would want to fund as an alternative. So it's not restricted to only being used within the plan area.
Okay. And then, am I allowed to ask Commissioner Freeman why the RMW parcel, why you wouldn't be interested in developing it, or why it would be tough to?
Basically, it's very expensive to build that building. It's probably a $25 million project. And for what the financing looks like in kind of the multifamily industry and what those units run for, it's very hard to make money doing it. The return is just not what it's worth for the risk and for the amount of cash you have to come up with to make it happen.
Got it. Okay.
And there is some infrastructure burden that is assigned to parcel 4, which is where the RMW zone is as well, to factor in.
So I did just have a conversation this week with a prospective buyer who does 100% affordable, and that may be the type of project that would be most conducive for this site, because they can actually finance the infrastructure concurrent with the building through tax credits and other types of programs that the state offers, which takes a very savvy developer, that's really honed in on that type of product to be able to do. So it's, kind of, as Dan Freeman was saying, it's not necessarily something that everyone wants to do, that there are certain builders who focus on, affordable housing projects, and that's their expertise and that's what they do. Similar to what we had with the artist lofts.
Got it. Sorry, I muted myself. And then, so with the infrastructure on that parcel, is it mainly the road, the Martis Drive? That's the main infrastructure with that parcel?
And a roundabout and frontage improvements and utility connections and, gosh, I can't remember everything on parcel 4. I think, Danielle, you might have that hidden slide. Did you keep that one?
I have it in there, but I don't know how they're so small. Okay. I don't know how helpful.
There's some general infrastructure related to roadways and frontage improvements.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Romack. Well, I think the questions have really mostly been asked, and I think the whole point here is, I'm going to say in advance, thank you to the Planning Commission, because I know you're going to be burdened with working out a lot of these details. But for me, the big question here is what triggers the workforce housing, and how do we incentivize that, of course. I know we've looked at that in a couple of different ways, tied to percentages, tied to square foot amount, or actual jobs created. So this is all part of the discussion. I am wondering if there is a way to, to obviously incentivize some of these desired development or uses, like the workforce housing, like a Truckee River winery or a similar use. So obviously we're not going to answer that question tonight, but of course I think we're all interested in looking at and evaluating what those incentives might be. I think we all read and we heard the public comment about the concern from the neighborhood right adjacent to that parcel, and obviously looking for ways to minimize the impact on that neighborhood, particularly from their traffic concerns. I could see that. So that's just the summary of my thoughts after listening to everybody's questions. I don't think I have any real specific questions for staff. At this point, has any of this discussion triggered additional questions for any of the commissioners or council members? Do we want to go back to anybody? I see Susie taking herself off of mute. Go ahead, Susie.
Great, thank you. So I'm still a little bit confused about the biz zone. It sounds like it can either be light industrial or office park. My question has to do with when the in lieu fees were figured out, it was sort of lumped in with industrial, which is a lower rate of workforce housing calculation. So if that does become just office park type stuff, do you then move it up into the workforce house calculation that's a little bit more intense for like office? Does that make sense?
No, because the way that the plan is structured, they're just going to pay the in lieu fee. So unless, it's changed through this process, we're not recalculating.
Okay, but the in lieu fee was based on an industrial use. And so that's why I'm asking. So
yes, it was. And that's what council wanted adopted was those set fees. So unless the planning commission makes a recommendation for council to change that, they would only pay that fee.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few additional questions, Mayor Klofstad, if I might.
Absolutely, Vice Mayor Henderson.
Thank you. Danielle, I think you said that the targeted uses, so for example, for the regional commercial, you talked about some of the targeted uses, furniture, equipment. There are still other allowable uses, though. Those were just the targeted ones, correct?
Yeah, I didn't list them all, but there's another 20-something, different types of allowed uses in there that are in the land use table.
Okay. And I guess something that I kind of a question that I'm throwing out there is that, bricks and mortar retail has changed so significantly, particularly due to the impacts of COVID, and just, are the targeted uses still sort of the appropriate targeted uses? I don't have an answer to that, but it's just something that I'm thinking about. And then as we think about housing, I'm just curious, if we took just phase one, for example, and the build out of that, do we have, and I realize this depends on if you're looking at square footage or number of jobs created, but do we have any sense of the number of jobs that have been created that would actually need housing?
I think Rayleigh's kind of touched on this when we were doing the sign appeal.
They stated that the grocery store has resulted in 150 new jobs. What we don't know is if those are, full-time equivalents or part-time. We suspect it's probably a mix of both, just understanding how how grocery stores are staffed. I don't think we have any data to know what percent of those are housed in Truckee or housed elsewhere.
Or what their income is. So, that's part of the dialogue that often happens when we get into projects is, do they have employees who make more than, moderate income and wouldn't necessarily need to have housing provided for them?
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think to that point, though, I think we've established that we do need housing. We especially need affordable, achievable housing. So I would say that it's likely, especially if there are new people coming to the area, which might be those higher paid jobs at Rayleigh's or at Mountain Hardware or any of these other places that are coming online, that they need housing too. And there's not a lot of availability out there. Councilmember Pallavi, did I see you raising your hand for some additional comments or questions? No? Okay. Are there any others from any of the commissioners or council members? Councilmember Zabriskie?
Yeah. These are comments. I don't want to give up on economic diversification. I really would like to see us balancing the increased employment with increased housing. I'm hopeful that this might help us, that Sugar Ranch might help us move people off of West River. to that location. And I would like to see something that takes into account reducing greenhouse gases. I want to thank Laurel Lippert and Sarah Kane for the letter. I think the commission, if not the council, will certainly consider the extension of Martis Drive, making Martis Drive a through street, and then the setback issue at the appropriate time. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Zabriskie. We apparently do have one more public comment, as I have not officially closed public comment yet, so.
Hello, my name is Sarah Green. I hope there's still time to submit a comment for the Jorger Ranch specific plan discussion this evening. I appreciate that there are 2 parcels that will not be developed. However, I would not consider these parcels as open space per se. They're more like buffer zones along Highway 267, an expanded right-of-way. I'd rather that we not elevate efforts higher than they deserve. We need to be clear and transparent with the community. Also, in regards to housing, I understand that there are still questions around the 40% trigger that would allow for workforce housing units to be developed. Nevertheless, I think it is essential to ensure deed-restricted, affordable workforce housing be included in Phase 3. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so going back to staff, I'm going to see if you have any additional questions or clarifying comments that you would like to make to us. Looking at Jen as well as those on the screen.
I think the one thing I might add is that we will likely ask for some very clear direction once we start getting into Phase 2. And I'm not talking about Soaring Ranch Phase 2. I'm talking about Phase 2 of the Jorger Ranch specific plan amendment. So what we're starting next Monday is Phase 1. What you'll see as a council on March 23rd is Phase 1. And then once we get to that point, moving into Phase 2, we will likely ask for some very clear bookends on what you do want us working on in terms of potential amendments to the specific plan. I think that'll be really critical for us to understand if you want to reopen up, all aspects of the plan or just certain aspects. I think that'll really help us focus our efforts, especially in light of where we're headed with the general plan, the 2040 general plan.
And the Phase 2 being specifically the land use discussion and uses.
Yes.
Okay.
Sort of other things not housing related, at least what we're trying to tackle in the next month.
Okay. And Jen?
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time tonight. We thought this would be helpful to set the tone and the stage for next week's discussion at the Planning Commission and then to come back to council. So thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. And Danielle and Jenna and Laura, thank you.
Yes, Danielle, Jenna, Laura, great job. This is a lot of work, and I know represented by a lot of boxes. I really appreciate you guys distilling this down for us and helping us focus our thoughts and our time and our energy. I will again in advance thank the Planning Commission for their hard work on this. And unless I see anybody else, I'm prepared to adjourn. We good? All right, so we're going to adjourn until the next town council meeting on March 9th and the Planning Commission, well, it's got Planning Commission meeting on March 16th, but you guys are meeting on Monday, right?
There's a special meeting March 1st.
Special meeting March 1st. Okay, so adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.